All right, welcome to another episode of the Black Mind Garden, where we are remapping minds so you can create a life of your design. And I am super excited today because we have another sister doc on. And I think we met in the clubhouse, right? That's where we originally met.
Right. Yeah.
I'm gonna
Yeah.
tell you that
Directly.
Clubhouse platform be connecting folks.
Uh-huh.
And I was hearing her talk, and I loved her energy and her platform. She is the owner of Pivot and Bloom Collective, and we're talking today about, when we got on the phone, we were going to talk about something completely else, and we started talking about the single mom life.
Mhm.
And single mom collaboration. So I'm excited to welcome Dr. Kamilah Williams to the show today. Hey, Dr. Kamilah, how you doing today?
Hey, Dr. Maisha. I'm doing well. Thank you for having me on. I'm super excited.
Yes, me too. It's always fun to connect with another mom in general, but also
Uh-huh.
connect with another single mom because
Hmm.
it's an interesting life we live in, especially if you're an entrepreneur. And
Yes.
there's the roller coaster of motherhood, and then there's the roller coaster of entrepreneurship, and then there's the freedom of both, right?
Hmm.
It's just
Yeah.
a whole life,
Mhm.
full and enjoyable life when you make it that way.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I always like to get the listeners to kind of get a feel for you and who you are and what you do and how you've come to be.
Well, as you said, my name is Dr. Kamilah Williams. I am a board certified family physician. I sometimes say a reformed family physician. I've recently changed from outpatient medicine to pursuing my dream and passion of helping people heal holistically. I have a podcast called Pivot and Bloom that is all about the cycle of wellness transformation. And that has come about in the last year with the pandemic. I am a single mom of a 6-year-old boy, a very active 6-year-old boy. And I'm just really, really excited to have a discussion about single motherhood because that is near and dear to my heart for several reasons.
Yeah. We're basically single mom twins because my son
Uh-huh.
is 6.5. And
Yep, there you
you
go.
know, I think I was sharing, man, I really wish we lived in the same city because we would
Uh-huh.
probably be having a play date,
Play date, yeah.
So I think with this podcast, what's been fun is meeting other moms. And I think I'm gonna have to do a mom tour where I just go around the country and maybe
Yeah,
at some point around the world and just for play date purposes,
that's a good idea.
because play dates really equal mom dates too.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Yeah, you make it a business and it's all written off, right?
That's right. That's
See?
right. That's right. I
Free
love
travel is always good.
it. Free travel is always good. Yeah. So, it's interesting. I want to kind of get, how it's been for you as a single mom. I know for myself, I became a single mom very, very early when my son was
Mhm,
2 months.
mhm,
And I would say, there was a part of me that says it wasn't by choice, but it really was actually. It was
mhm,
very much by choice because I was in a relationship that wasn't working. And it's not that it was toxic or abusive. And it was the kind of relationship that most people would stay in just for the sake of a child. And I
mhm,
wasn't willing to do that. And, now I'm happy to say that me and my son's father are very close, and we can talk
mhm.
all about healthy
Yeah, that's great.
co-parenting inside of this
Yeah.
as well, right?
Yeah.
Because it's something that apparently I've been told is not super common, but I believe it's more
Mhm,
common than is actually made out to be. You know.
mhm, mhm. So yeah, so I mean, we're twins in that arena too. I was actually pregnant when we separated. So my son was not actually here yet, and here we are getting separated. Same kind of thing. It was not originally my choice, but I know it was for the best. We two now are friends and co-parents, and things are going well. It doesn't always start out like that, but it is
Yeah.
there now, and happy to say we can really work together. But yeah, I essentially ended up finding out that he just wanted to end the marriage. There was not really any reconciliation to be had, so we just kind of separated and moved forward. And it was a tough time. It was something that I had kind of not wanted for myself. which I don't know that anybody really wants that unless you choose it, if you're like an adoptive mom, or you take on someone else's children by choice.
Mhm.
But I really didn't want that for myself, because I was born to a single mom. And so I saw how she struggled. She, of course, beat it over my head, like, this is not what you want to do. You're going to be successful. You're going to have a child. And we planned everything out too. We were married, we planned out our home, we planned out having a baby, but things just didn't work out. And here I was in that same position. And so it was just not ideal for me. Went through a lot of changes around that, was still working full-time family practice. So working and trying to, and recently married. So people were kind of like, oh, this is great, you're pregnant and you're having a baby. And it was just a lot. There was a lot of emotional changes around that. But, I'm so glad to say that I learned a lot about myself, about my faith, and just about this season of singleness and single motherhood in these last several years. My son's almost 7, so about 7 years. So yes.
Well, I really think and that there is, and we're twins in another way. Like I was raised in a single parent home as well
Yeah.
for a very long time. And my mom had gone through multiple marriages and multiple marriage breakups. And
Hmm.
so I'm basically product of a single mom home. And
Hmm.
it was the same thing, like how she worked so hard and she struggled. And it was like, oh, I'm not going to be, for me, it was the statistic. And
Hmm.
in saying that, I want to like really talk about the narrative of single motherhood right now and how we can begin to shift the narrative, because I think that for so long, single motherhood has been sort of like had a negative connotation to it.
Hmm.
You tell somebody you're a single mom and they're like, oh, and they
Hmm.
give you that face, that like, oh, poor you face,
Uh-huh.
right?
Yeah.
And so, I started to language it like, single mom status as a
Hmm.
status, like, this
Yeah.
is not like, oh, I'm poor me, I'm a single mom. Cause
Hmm.
honestly, me and my son, we have a rhythm. We do well,
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
and I'm sure
Exactly.
you do too. And to
Hmm.
have like a community, like not only my son's father's very involved and we're friends, even though he lives in a different state, like
Okay.
we just like flow, right? As
Hmm.
an example, actually a very recent example, I'm assisting for a big training inside of a developmental program for my master trainer program and NLP. And it's coming up the last week in June. Now, my son's in camp the first 4 weeks, but the last 4 weeks the last week I noticed he was going to be out of camp. And I thought to myself, I wonder if Bruce could take, Delson for that last week. So I don't have to
Hmm.
worry about having to manage that while
Yeah.
assisting in a training.
Hmm.
And what's interesting is we had already had an agreement around the summer for the end of July. And then
Hmm.
out of the blue, yesterday, he calls me and he says, hey, you know what? I really want to take I want to take Delson that last week in June. I was
Hmm.
like, look at
Perfect.
God. I was like,
Right.
yes, it works out perfectly.
Uh-huh.
That's how we flow. It's just like a
Yeah.
rhythm. And so this narrative of like single parenthood being bad or co-parenting being a negative experience,
Hmm.
we have to start to remap that and to shift that.
Hmm. Yes. I mean, I think that it's something that I definitely dealt with. I think going back to being pregnant and being in a clinic where people knew I had recently been married, and not to mention I was the only Black physician.
Mm-hmm.
So in my mind, it was, oh, that's what's expected of us, right? That we're going to be single and having a baby and not having you're the father involved. All that kind of stuff came in
Right.
my head, even though I was a physician. And then there was that sympathy thing where people found out, and it was like this whole like sad sob story thing. I'm like, it really isn't like that. I just, I'm not talking about it because it's just not relevant anymore. It's like
Right.
it happened and we're moving on.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, it just got to the point where I was like, this is where we are, and this is what I have, this is my life right now. So I've got to live it, I've got to enjoy it, and I've got to find a way to make peace and have things be, seamless. And so after a while, after you get through all the yucky stuff in the beginning, we just kind of started to focus on him and say, he's the center, he's the one that we need to be focused on, I mean, God and our son,
Right.
and just both, leaned on those things and really made that a priority. And it blossomed, where we can talk about with school, we talked about kindergarten and we
Mhm.
worked that out. And, there's all these things. We live in separate areas. We live in the same city, but in, about 35 minutes apart. So if one of us is working or something's going on and we've got to take him here or there, we do that. We usually meet in the middle so that nobody has to go too far. I mean, we just find ways to make it work. And I have people try to oppose that, like, oh, I would be mad if he told me he had to work. And, but I'm like, this is, it usually works out because there's days where he doesn't have to work and I have something to do. And he's like, just like you said, hey, can I take him? I'm going to take him for the weekend. Or I'm like, okay, that's fine with
Yeah, exactly.
me.
Yay!
Yeah, exactly. So it works out and it can work out. And I think we still deal with that on some level where there's systems in place. Actually, we talk about systems when it comes to, Black health and, racism and all this stuff, but there's systems in place that kind of oppose co-parenting where we share accounts for our son at the school and we do that. And a lot of times there's like, oh no, you guys have to have separate things. You have to have separate things. And we're like, we fine. We don't, but they're so used to there being that tension
Right.
that I think we definitely need to change the narrative and the overall ideology behind single parenthood and co-parenting.
Yeah. You know what's really interesting, and you touched on this, is that when you tell someone that you're a single parent as a woman, and especially as a Black woman, they
Mhm.
automatically assume that the father's not involved, or that
Absolutely.
there's no positive male influence in the person's life,
Mhm.
especially if you have a boy, right?
Yeah.
And it's very interesting, because there's women out there who are choosing single parenthood, either like you said, by adoption or taking on a family member's children, or even by insemination, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And when people look at that, they're like, wow, why would you choose? But why not? Why
Mhm.
not? Right? And oh, they're not going to have a positive male role model. Well, how do you know? And
Mhm.
that's the thing. Like, just because a father may not be in the city or in the household doesn't necessarily mean there's not a balance of figure in
Yeah.
one's life, right?
Mhm.
Because, like I said, Bruce lives in a whole nother city. He lives in a
Yeah.
whole nother city, a whole other
Mhm.
state, actually,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
And I have, family members and friends and my mom's husband and my father. And, there are like so many um, positive male role models that are not like partners of mine, right?
Mhm.
They're just family members who step in at any given
Yeah.
time to help. And that's the power of community, right? It's the
Mhm.
power
Mhm.
of community. And so I think we also have to change this narrative of just because one is a single mom or a single parent, even, like, because there might be some single dads out there, and
Mhm.
there may be the same assumption, like, oh,
Mhm.
if the dad has the kids, then that means the mom must have been a drug addict, or the
Yeah.
mom must be in jail, or the mom must have
Mhm.
blah blah blah. You never know. You
Mhm.
never know. They could have either reached an agreement,
Mhm.
or could be, a widow, could be anything, right?
Mhm.
And so we have to stop making assumptions,
Yeah.
and people in general who are not of the in the Black community have to
Right.
stop making assumptions about what the rest of the family looks like when there's a single parent household.
Hmm. Oh my gosh, that one is, I could talk about this for hours. How many times have I been approached in different places or people are like, oh, I know it must be tough, his dad's not around, or does he get to see his dad? And I'm like, I mean,
Right.
like his dad goes out of his way to meet us in the morning just to take him like a mile away to school. Like
Mhm.
he, is very involved with his son and
Yeah.
he's in law enforcement. This is funny, but like if he gets in trouble at school, I tell him his dad's gonna call him on FaceTime and he's sitting there in all his gear and he's telling him like he shouldn't have done that. And it's so funny because it's just as a bunch of a presence as if he was in person
Mhm.
because he just doesn't want that phone call. So he's very involved. And I'm like, he has a dad, but he also has a village. When I had him, I had several friends that were around and family members that were around. And especially the men that have just rallied around him. And I think even if we were married, we would still need that same village around him he needs different male influence, he needs different female influence. Like we have a bunch of people that will get him together at a moment's notice. And I love that because sometimes I may not have the energy or I just need reinforcements, you know? And I have that in my ex-husband, but I also have that in his village. So I think we also need to embrace that and then have other single moms embrace that too, because sometimes it can be a little nerve-wracking to let other people around your child when you've gone through something a little traumatic. You're like, oh no, I'm going to keep him close. But I have learned to let him learn from other people, you know, as much as he learns from me.
Yeah, I think that's so important because I think that people, you know, the kids learn different lessons from different adults and different ways of being. And it's interesting because early on in this, when I first started the podcast, I had an interview with a friend of mine, and he's a integral part of Delson's life as well. That he talks about this in his own life as a male, growing up in a two-parent household, having all of these various male mentors in his life. And so we have to normalize that the village again. And I know that it's challenging because you hear stories about, you know, like children being taken advantage of or being kidnapped or being, you know, like that's scary for us moms. And that's why you create the village of people that you trust. And, you know, you create a communicatory relationship with your child that they know they can tell you anything, right? Delson will tell me anything. He probably tells me stuff that people don't want me to tell them because
say too much.
Right. We have an agreement, no secrets, right? And I can ask him at any time, hey, is this happening? You know, is this happening in such and such household? And he's like, nope, like just confident, right? And I would say, well, what would you do if it did? Oh, well, I tell you, and I would tell them to stop it. And, you know, like this is, he knows what to do. And I think it's important in creating that communication channel with our kids so that we can be comfortable leaving our kids with our village sometimes, you know, like when we need to do the things that we need to do in work and sometimes in play, you know, running errands, drop the kid off for a couple of hours with the fellow mommy and you know, come back in 2 hours and pick them up.
No, yeah. I mean, I think that's so important. That was something I had to learn. And, you know, my best friend duo is a married couple. And something my pastor said was, you know, around the time that we met was, you know, it's important that our singles connect with marrieds and our marrieds connect with singles. And similarly, what you mentioned before was, you know, that whole idea of, you know, I need to protect my child. I need to make sure that, and we do the same things with ourselves, right? Like, oh, that's inappropriate to be friends with a married couple or to have, but I mean, it has created this village, this family that I don't have in town. Me or my ex-husband have family here in town. I'm in Ohio, in Columbus, Ohio. We don't have blood family here. So we were just kind of, when we were married, even we were just kind of, it was just us. And having people step in on his side and on my side that I know are always looking out for my son is amazing. I mean, he cannot go anywhere, even as big as Columbus is, he can't go anywhere where somebody doesn't know him, recognize him, something. So, and then you get that village of patients, right? Like people have, I have his picture up. I used to have his picture up in my office and, you know, they see him and it's like, okay, well, we know that that's Dr. Williams' son. So, you know, he can't get away with much. And I love that. I love that aspect of having a village for me and for him and being embracing that.
Yeah. And I, you know, I have to admit, because Atlanta's so spread out that I'm still building that. And he has, like, we have a tight knit community, but I'd love to even expand that. And that's another thing, like you can always be expanding in your community of people, your inner circle of people. And sometimes that inner circle changes and evolves and grows as you change and you evolve and you grow. And so that's what I'm learning is as I'm growing into new spaces and new communities, I'm interacting with new people and having to cultivate new friendships and new inner circles, right? And it really can be challenging because you do have to cultivate that trust and you have to have a mutual understanding. And one of the things that I say is like looking at how, you know, people might know, well, how do you know who you can trust? Is you look at their values, you look at their, especially their parenting values, right? The parenting values of both people. And you know, meeting, especially if you're single, connecting with married, you know, being around both couples, both aspects of the couple, the entire couple together, so
Yep.
that you can see how they interact with each other. You can see how, the father interacts with the children, the mom interacts with the children, and then you begin to like lengthen the, I say lengthen the leash is what I say.
Hey, I get it. Right.
So I think that's important for people to really understand. If you want to build that community, you have to look at, well, what are your values, and who are the people in your life who share your parenting values, right? And if you're in a community of people who don't share your values, it's probably time to look for a new community.
Exactly. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think that is also something that in my singleness that has happened quite, unintentionally, where, God just started pruning my friends group, and it's not that anything negative happened or was like this big blow up, but I just noticed that start to shift, especially once he blessed me with motherhood. It's like, okay, this, we've got to have this a certain way. And there's certain people that should be around and certain people that just aren't meant to go into this next season with you.
Right.
And you have to be comfortable doing that. And I think sometimes we get caught up on the nostalgia, and this person did this and this person did that. And I mean, to be honest, I've always been a person that could kind of put people in a box, so to speak, and say, okay, this was their time, I'm good, I'm moving on. I used to think it was pathologic, but then my counselor told me it was fine. But being able to healthily move on without there being like negative connotations or drama regarding that. And also, especially, there's people that were in my son's life that I had to do that with, people that did have that role as, somebody who was helping me to, or being in his village, and just moving on and having that change as I changed and as he got older. And that has to be okay. You have to be willing to do that and understand. It's not a matter of, sitting there and like, just, rapidly checking people off, but it's really just being intentional with your circle.
I think you can feel it, like when people grow and they evolve, they can feel the shift in any relationship. And sometimes they're afraid to allow themselves to let go, especially if it's a person who's been in their life for a very long time. And, maybe it's that you don't completely cut them off, and you're shifting your attention to people who are more in line with your values and what you're up to, and your visions and your goals, and the things that you're teaching your children. And so I really love what you said. Like, I'm similar to you, when I'm complete, I'm complete. And I think that, man, I didn't realize how alike we actually were.
Right.
I used to think there was something wrong with me about that. Like, I just be like, all right, I'm good. I'm done. I'm good.
Yeah.
And just move on. But really, what I learned is that it's just the ability to be complete within yourself. And then, if I think the next level of it is having the person that you're complete with feel complete as well. Right? Because then that's the difference between really being complete and really just being like, bloop, bloop, you're out, cutting them off. Right. What do they say? Like canceling someone.
Right.
Cancel culture. Right.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's really being complete in a particular relationship and moving forward, or acknowledging a shift in a relationship and moving forward. And then even if there's a person who has been in your life, but not like super close, and you want to advance that, communicating that. I think it all boils down to communication at the end of the day.
It does. And I'm trying to foster that in my son. You mentioned having an open line of communication, and getting him, he's 6, and he will tell a story in a minute sometimes, and you're just like, oh, I can't stand that. But it's just teaching him that it's okay to tell me the truth, and having him see me doing that, watching me in my relationships being truthful, because kids will listen to your conversation and tell you like, well, that's not what you said yesterday about Miss So-and-so.
Right.
You're just like, oh, you have this constant like recorder sitting next to you. So it really causes you to have that line of communication. And I think that's where people sometimes get their boundaries mixed up. Like, there's been times where I haven't necessarily abruptly cut someone off, but like I've kind of just gradually outgrown them, or they've outgrown me. And then the perception is that I'm cutting them off. I'm like, no, I don't have any hard feelings. I just, Like if we talk, it's fine. And I think navigating that is important too, because it can be stressful. It can weigh on your emotional and mental, well-being, to have someone like, well, but you should stop talking to me and why. And I'm very transparent. So I will tell you why or what kind of shifted for me.
Mhm.
But it's not your job to make them accept that, but that's that communication. Like, this is what happened and I feel like this is where we are and I'm okay with that.
Yeah. And then like keeping in mind like the bigger vision, you're always creating and maintaining a vision
Hmm.
or village of people who empower you, right?
Hmm.
Empower you, empower your children, your child, your family. You always
Hmm.
want to be, as you're moving forward, moving up, however people want to say in life, excelling, advancing, evolving. You want to
Hmm.
keep around you the people who are going to support that growth. And
Hmm.
that actually shows it models to the children.
Hmm.
I'm modeling to my son, okay, I'm always keeping community that's empowering, that's lifting me up, and not community that's tearing me down or holding me back or naysaying. And I'm allowing around him people that
Hmm.
are lifting,
Hmm.
and not people um, who are going to be abusive, right?
Right. Right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, so I wanna ask about Pivot and Bloom. I want to ask about your holistic health coaching and your integrative,
Hmm.
and how it is being, not only what you do, but how it is being a single mom and being an entrepreneur, because that's something that it's different, right?
It is.
Because
Yeah.
number one, like I can say, like for me personally, because I now work from home, it actually is it makes it more workable. Like the
Hmm.
pandemic was a little easier because from a logistical standpoint, because I already
Hmm.
work from home,
Hmm.
I didn't have to go somewhere.
Hmm.
It was challenging in other ways, having to try to work from home with a six and a
Right.
half year old,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, that was a whole
Yeah.
different kind of challenge. And I was blessed to not, have the issue of leaving work, having to find
Hmm.
childcare, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
So being an entrepreneur and a single parent is, in and of itself, that's a challenge. How does that work for you?
Well, it's funny. I always tell people it's kind of a joke. God has a great sense of humor. And he had me build this platform called Pivot and Bloom, so it's about transforming and changing and, flourishing, but then going back to that starting point and always being willing to evolve. And yeah, I had to teach myself that lesson. So when I started it, I was outpatient family medicine, thinking about entrepreneurship, but terrified of it, kind of like, it's really not my thing. No, I'm not doing that. No, but I was like, I'll do a podcast. And
Right.
so I started the podcast. And I mean, I'm an introvert. So typically speaking and things is like terrifying to me, but it was actually really therapeutic. It was like having my own little counselor that didn't talk back. So I was really excited about that. And I started talking about wellness, which I had become passionate about, from my own wellness and weight loss journey. I had lost, over 30 pounds and kept it off, which, was a challenge, for 4 years using, just relying on God's resources, natural foods, and a low carb lifestyle. And so I was really excited about like talking about that and having people understand that, but also with the pandemic, talking about how health affected our people, how health affected the Black community. I mean, and how COVID in particular affected the Black community and why, with the system of war that were in place doing that. So it was kind of a hodgepodge of things.
Mhm.
And as I did that, I started to run into people like yourself and, Charmaine Gregory, who coached me on podcasting. And the microphone sat in the box for 2 months. And then it was like, she just popped up on my page one day, like, I'm opening this podcast launching course. I'm like, okay, that's a sign that I need to do this.
Right.
And so I finally did it, and that was it. Like when I started doing that, right after that, somebody asked me to speak at a church event online, which has made things way easier for me, like you said, with having a child at home. I was like, I need to do this all the time. And that's when the bug bit me. I'm like, okay, I've got to find a way to do this. I want to do this. And I wanted to coach for a while, but I always thought it was weird to coach as a doctor, right? Because I would look up physician health coach, physician coach, and it would always show you people that coach under the guidance of a physician. Physician does physician things,
Right.
coach does coach things. And so I was just like, oh my gosh, this is like amazing that I can do both. And I started to see all these amazing women, especially doing this. And I just was like, I've got to do this. So I started looking in, like, got connected with all of the, the big names that we're all semi-celebrities to us, and just started listening to people like Dr. Una and Dr. Omalara and, just all those people, Dr. Kimmy, all these people, and just started really tapping into that. And what I found was that I found my daytime job to be oppressive at that point, where it was like the time was just, I was like, well, all my time is gone. Like, especially once we came out of, well, have we come out of COVID? Well, when COVID was starting to get to the point where we could see patients more often in person,
Mm-hmm.
I found it really hard to get my son and do the stuff. And he was in school.
Mm.
And I was like, I think it would actually be easier to be home because I had days where I was working from home and it was a lot simpler. And so that's where it started. And then, I ended up, kind of once I said yes to that, to
Mhm.
entrepreneurship, I ended up getting a part-time job that fits my passion, doing weight loss consultations and intake. And it sets my hours, I can set my own hours. I can decide what I want to do. And then I decided to resign from my position. And in that, I was stressed, there was burnout, there was all those things.
Yeah.
And it was starting to affect my relationship with my son. And he would have to be, my best friends would go pick him up from school. And I had that village in place there, which was super important. But I was really it was weighing heavily on me that I wasn't home with him. And when I did get home, I was exhausted and irritable and all these things. And I was like, there's no way that me leaving this job is going to be better for him. Like in my mind, it was like, this is not going to be, but like, the more I thought about it, the more I was like, this has to be how, this has to go. So as you know, God tends to do, he kind of pushed me to, and it was like a hard shove to send that resignation letter. And I did, and never looked back. I did my last 90 days and just accepted whatever was to come and decided to build my own business.
Nice.
And since I've been home, all the time, it is like this liberation that I can't explain. Even though I do have to be disciplined and I have to do a lot of things and I'm working on workspaces and making sure things are in place.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a different level of busy, a different type of busy,
Yeah.
but it allows so much flexibility that, I wonder why I know why, but I wonder why more single moms don't embrace entrepreneurship. That's something I actually want to do, is have them embrace that and be more open to it, because it's been such a godsend for me.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the things that I found is so much freedom. I'm 46. So I, I obviously had my son a little bit later, which means I focused on my career. Like my entire life was focused on my career. And so, when you get, when you get in a position where then you have a child. And for me, I was pretty clear that it was probably going to be my one and only, at that age. I thought about maybe trying to have a second one, but then once I became a single mom, I was like, well, it's going to take a lot of time.
Yeah.
And by the time in my world, by the time I find and date and trust and marry and then enjoy, newlywed status for a little while, I'll be damn near 50.
Right. It was the diapers for me, by the way. When he was out of diapers, I was like, yeah, no, that's it. This is the last.
That's it. And then I got real comfortable in
exactly
the flow. And I was like, yeah, I'm done. I'm pretty much done. But, I decided, because it was really, once I had my son, and I still was in clinical practice at the time, my private practice in integrative medicine. And I hired, a couple of people, docs and mid-levels to kind of cover me while I was gone. I went on maternity leave and I didn't want to come back. I was like, and it was my practice that I actually enjoy.
Which is amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, oh, okay. So that means it's time for me to shift, because I really wanted to have the freedom to be where my son was at any given time, at any given place, and that's what entrepreneurship, this type of entrepreneurship allowed, right? The freedom. Now, granted, I had my own practice. And so technically I did have the freedom. And we all know that when in medical practice, you don't really have the freedom, whether it's your
Exactly. I was
practice.
gonna say it doesn't matter who owns it, oh my gosh, you
You
do
work
not
for the
have any freedom.
patients. You work for the patient.
Right, exactly.
Right. And in private practice, you pretty much eat what you kill. So,
Mm-hmm.
like that is whatever, especially I was a cash-based practice. So that
Mm-hmm.
means whenever I didn't work, I didn't make money. So I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to like shift into something that allowed me to leverage my time and allowed me that bit of freedom. And I think that's the gift of entrepreneurship, especially work from home type of entrepreneurship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is just fantastic. I was afraid. I mean, anybody who's listening to this, don't think I wasn't afraid. I always like to say, I haven't gotten to talk about it a whole lot yet, but I'm not sitting on a pile of money. I don't have a money tree. I don't have like, I just had to decide. And oddly enough, even though the money is irregular now, I was used to that paycheck. I
Mm-hmm.
call it golden handcuffs. I was used to that paycheck and my benefits.
Mm-hmm.
And like now that that's not coming in and it's coming in a different way with my part-time job, it's like I have enough, but I'm also just more free. Like the things that I used to be scared to buy, coaching is one of those things. The things I
Yeah.
used to be scared to pay for, the things I used to think, oh, that's too much money, I can't. Now it's like I need this, so I'm gonna buy it. Like I started running recently again, so I need new running shoes. Normally it's like they can be expensive. So normally it's like, oh, I'll just wait. Like, nope, it's not worth it to wait because while I'm running on shoes that don't serve me, I'm affecting my body negatively when I'm trying to affect it positively. So it's like these decisions that you start to make
Mm-hmm.
that just change everything. It's really changed everything for me.
It's a whole mindset shift. And so,
Yep.
I think that it's important for us to, it's like sort of circling back to this whole narrative that has been built up around the struggle of single
Mm-hmm.
parenthood. It really doesn't have to be. Then that's not to say
Mm-mm.
that there are not single parents out there who do
Mm-hmm.
struggle. So that's
Yes.
not to diminish that
No,
experience,
not at all.
because I mean, look, there was a time where I did struggle as a single parent, right?
Mm-hmm.
In that
Mm-hmm.
transition.
Yep.
And even as a practice owner, like people think doctors
Mm-hmm.
are rolling the dough, but as you
Yeah.
know, we all know we're not we're rolling in the debt is what we're
Yeah.
really rolling
I like that. I'm gonna use that. So
and
true though.
yes, and the and
Mm-hmm.
the the learning for most of us highly salaried type professionals is
Mm-hmm.
to learn what to do with that money. So,
Mm-hmm.
get a financial advisor. For those who are listening, get a financial advisor.
Mm-hmm.
Start working on that
Mm-hmm.
early in
Yeah.
life,
Mm-hmm.
because people like I'm in that process where I'm just turning that corner of
Mm-hmm.
being able to invest and start to create new
Yeah.
streams of income with real estate and with the
Mm-hmm.
market and all of that. But it took me a minute, and
Mm-hmm.
a lot of the counterparts I'm seeing are doing it much earlier. So that's
Mm-hmm.
because people are being mindful of money and getting financial advisors earlier. But my point is, as a single parent, especially if you have the mindset of generating wealth, then it shifts the way you view the opportunity as a single
Mm-hmm.
parent, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's always a way out of the struggle. Yes, the
Mm-hmm.
system is stacked
Mm-hmm.
against us in a lot of
A
ways.
lot of ways. Yeah.
And it doesn't mean we have to be a victim of that, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So the most powerful thing is our thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And when we start within ourselves to change the narrative of what single parenthood, single momhood means, then we can start to shift our environment around us to support an empowered version of single parenthood.
Mm-hmm.
And that when we shift our environment, then we can actually start to create other new opportunities and produce other results in our lives.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with that. Yeah, that's really great. Yeah. My mindset, I talk about mindset a lot. And I really see the changes that I've gone through with my mind and the way that I thought. And one of the ways I did that really tangibly was sitting down in January, the month I quit my job at the end of January. So during that month, I sat down instead of doing New Year's resolution. I wrote down all the limiting beliefs that I had. I did 3 a day. So that was 93 limiting beliefs. Couldn't believe that I had 93 separate limiting beliefs. Some of them had to do with certain things, certain themes. But yeah, I mean, cleaning all of that out, I know that's the work that you do. Clearing all of that out was just amazing for my mental clarity.
That's awesome. Well, man, you and I, as you can see, we can literally talk for hours on this.
Forever. Yeah.
Like what you're passionate about, what I'm passionate about. This is one of my favorite topics. Anything mindset, anything momhood, like motherhood is just so precious, right? It's so precious.
Absolutely.
It's probably the best thing that's ever happened to me in my entire life
It
is becoming a mom, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Transformational thing.
Agree.
My son is my teacher, my coach, right? He is my legacy. He is, he's everything, right?
Yeah.
And and he's funny, and I'm sure
oh my gosh.
oh my God, the 6-year-old personality. I mean,
yes.
oh my God. And then the little like heart moments, the heart, grabbing moments where they come and they kiss you and they empower you. I'm like a 6-year-old empowering me, but he does,
right. Isn't that crazy? I said that too. I was like, maybe people don't think I'm making this up. Like he would walk up to me randomly and say, "Mommy, you're doing so good. You did all your stuff today. You deserve to relax." I'm like,
yes. Yeah. My son's like, "Mommy, I want you to come cuddle with me and let's just relax for a while. Let's just relax together for a while and watch how we're currently on the Legends of Korra. That's what he likes." And so,
okay.
Yeah. So I kind of get into it too. We watch The Last Avatar, and I'll be like, "No, what?" He's like, "Can I watch it?" I'm like, "You can't watch it. We're watching it together." We have these kind of conversations. It doesn't even feel like he's 6.
Yeah, little best friend, right?
Yeah. So I mean, we could talk for hours about motherhood and how precious it is and how wonderful single motherhood could be when you embrace and have the community around you and have a positive co-parenting relationship. And if you are a mom who doesn't have an involved father, it's not something that has to be the end of the world. You can create positive community around you, right? So
Absolutely.
I just, shifting that narrative. So first of all, I just want to thank you for this conversation, because I always leave these conversations so empowered and hyped and lifted, and just for being a sister mom, for being a sister doc, and for doing what you do in the coaching. And so I want you to tell the listeners, just like a little bit more about your program, your coaching, and how they can reach out to you if they're ready to take that next step.
All right. Well, I am currently shifting my focus to single moms, which is super exciting. Pivot and Bloom was kind of a general thing. I have a lot of interests, a lot of passions, and I'm shifting that over to something called Pivot and Bloom Collective, which will be housed on YouTube. And so you can look that up. I'm still working on it, but it's coming. It will have all of those different aspects, the physician, wellness, the syndemic, this is what I call it, the syndemic of COVID and Black health and all of that stuff. So my real passion is, of course, holistic health, but where it comes to single moms. And so being raised by a single mom, becoming a single mom myself, I learned to heal myself naturally with a holistic health approach. And so I want to help other single Christian moms improve their health and lose weight using God's resources in a natural low carb lifestyle. And that program will be launching at the end of July of 2021. If you want to contact me, I am on Facebook as Kamilah Marie, Milahmarie. And you can also connect with Pivot and Bloom Podcast on Facebook. And then on Instagram, it's at Pivot and Bloom Podcast. And then you can reach me directly at Kamilah Marie MD. It's KAMILAHMARIEMD. That may be shifting, but for now you can reach me there, and I'll be glad to talk to you and just see how I can help you change your life.
Awesome. Well, listen, if it does shift and change at the time, by the time we release the podcast, it will be in the show notes. We'll have all the updated information, links to reach out, links to connect directly with Dr. Kamilah. in our show notes, as well as if you're watching on YouTube, in the description. So please go and follow and check out Dr. Kamilah Williams. Especially if you're a single mom and you're wanting to pursue that holistic lifestyle, then reach out to her and know that, you can be as empowered as anyone and as successful and produce as many results and as effective and as anything as a single parent, as a single mom, as anyone else out there. We have to start shifting the narrative. So thank you so much for this conversation.
Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. And so you guys, of course, you know where to find me. And this moment is all about Dr. Kamilah Williams. So go and check her out. If you like this episode, if you are finding it valuable, please leave a comment or leave a review on your favorite podcast platform so that the people who are listening afterwards really get the transformation that's happening in these conversations. I know there is no podcast without my listeners. So I want to thank you once again for hanging in with us. And, we will see you on the next episode. Y'all have a great rest of the day. Stay safe out there and have a great rest of the week. Namaste.